Ladies and gentlemen, let us officially start. My name is Dr. Hanna Shelest. I'm Director for Security Programs and Global Outreach at the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism. And today I have an honor to moderate our event dedicated to the Ukraine-Brazil relations. That is not the accident that Ukrainian Prism decided to organize the online event on such a topic, because for the last 3 years we've been implementing the project dedicated to the new global partnerships of Ukraine, where we tried to establish relations and to build relations between Ukraine and different countries around the globe. And definitely Latin America also been one of the priorities. A year ago, our experts had a pleasure of visiting Brazil, talking there with the different experts. After this, we had the publication about the Ukraine-Brazil relations perspective. You can find the English version of this text online at our website. And different meetings been happening within this year, offline and online, understanding the distance and all the travel difficulties. So I'm very glad that today we have the opportunity, because of the initiative of our Latin American team within the Ukrainian Prism and the Embassy of Ukraine in Brazil, to organize these timely discussions. We know that relations between two countries were not that easy within the last 30 years. We had ups and downs, we have a lot of challenges, but at the same time, each time we hear about the opportunities, unrealized opportunities that are still there. So today, we will have the opening remarks from the two embassies, and then I will give the floor to our distinguished speakers, both from Ukraine and Brazil. I will be announcing them just before giving the floor to them. And all those who are joining us as the guest, I'm encouraging you to put your questions into the chat so all the speakers can see it. And in the end, we will do our best to answer as many of these questions. Why I encourage you to write these questions into the chat, because maybe the next speaker, when they're coming for their presentation, they already will be able to reflect some of those questions that you as the listeners consider important. So that would give us a little bit more time probably for the speakers also to consider your questions. As we have quite a number of very respectful and interesting speakers, I will also ask them to be 7 minutes maximum with the introductory remarks. So we will be able to come with the second round of the questions or of your commands to each other. And for the beginning, let's proceed with the protocol. And I would like to invite Igor Abdalla from the Embassy of Brazil to Kyiv to say his initial welcoming remarks to our participants.
Добрый вечер, boa tarde, boa noite. It's a pleasure to be talking to you this evening. I congratulate Prism for the initiative on the person of Dr. Shelest, the friends from the Embassy of Ukraine in Brasília, with whom we have been in permanent contact to enhance bilateral relations. And the participants, I'm quite happy to find some Brazilian scholars among the participants. Gave me double joy, I would say. First, because I think it's very important to enhance knowledge of Ukraine in Brazil, and specifically in academy, broadly, but in academy, given their role in public opinion formation in our country, media participation and all. And second, because I have an academic background, so I'm more familiar with academic dialogue and work and everything. Let me give a very few highlights on bilateral relations that my contribution, right, to to this event, and then we can go to the speakers to talk about the specific issues they will want to talk. We have a strategic partnership which was launched by then and current President Lula when he visited Kyiv in 2009. And I basically agree with Dr. Shelest when she says that there have been ups and downs. That's true. Had very ambitious projects in the beginning, the space cooperation project, and also the joint production of insulin, just to name the two, the pair of most notorious and ambitious projects we held back then. Unfortunately, they didn't come to bear fruits. We today have this strategic partnership developed in a political dialogue in several levels. Last month, to begin at the top, President Lula and President Zelensky spoke at the opening of the United Nations General Assembly, the margins of the opening, of course. The same happened 2 years ago in 2023. They also had a phone call that year, and below then, the second most important level of foreign ministers, and our minister, Mauro Vieira, has been in permanent contact with André Sibirra. They talk on telephone, they talked several times, and they also met in the margins of multilateral events. And we have also important mechanism more in the day-to-day basis of foreign ministers, which is the political consultations, basically the vice ministers of the two ministers in charge of Brazil, Ukraine, and Ukraine and Brazil. They talk to see what can be done to enhance bilateral relations. And of course, all those contacts, they have been the most important issue is the war in Ukraine, of course, since 2022. So how we can contribute to end the conflict, that has been our focus since the beginning. President Lula has been very vocal about it, and we have also provided humanitarian aid from the first days, from March 2022, which means the very beginning of the war. Medicines, food. Last July, Brazil provided some vaccines to Ukraine. They arrived here in Kyiv for about 3 months ago. And I would also like to mention, because I also understand Verkhovna Rada is participating, right? There's been parliamentary cooperation and visits. Last year, we had a visit of members of Parliament of Brazil. In August, our Ukrainian partners reminded us then that it had been 13 years since the previous visit from Brazilian parliamentarians to Ukraine. We had a very nice session and dialogue with President of Ukraine Parliament, Stefan Shuk, at that point. And in the end of the year, in December, Brazilian senators came to Ukraine. And 3 Brazilian senators came to Ukraine, and also possibility to have talks with Ukrainian members of parliaments and authorities in general. Well, and also in the strategic partnership, there's this economic component to it. I may say that our trade has fell considerably since the war began. May say that it fell at a rate of 2/3 in the first 2 years of the war, not 2/3, 2/3 in the first year, 2/3 in the second year of the war. And now it's recovered a bit, but we both, Brazilians and Ukrainians, know that we can do more, have to find ways to get our trade back on track, right? Today is around $106 million. Ukraine has actually some surplus of $6 million. And also a very important dimension to us to try to work here at the embassy is the kind of, I would say, societal level. And that's majorly pushed by the considerable size of the Ukrainian community in Brazil, in the south of the country, state of Paraná, state of Prudentópolis. We all know the story here. There are 600,000 Ukrainian descendants living there. They cherish a lot your culture. and your values, and it's very important for the fabric of bilateral relations, this context and this push given by this sizable Ukrainian community and in Brazil. Well, about the questions, to give the floor to the other speaker, very interesting questions. I mean, the role of the countries. Well, I believe countries have roles in international relations. From the time I was a scholar, the states are not alike. Each state is like the other. No, we perform different roles. So how we enhance each other's role? Very interesting question. Uphold international law and global stability. So that's very optimistic. And this uphold international stability. I mean, I think the main trends of international relations today is basically the erosion of rules, institutions, and norms, especially in the field of secure peace and security. And the war in Ukraine is obvious, the most important example of this, especially now with the ceasefire in Gaza. There's no doubt the war in Ukraine is very important to demonstrate that norms and institutions are eroding on a scary pace in the last years. And well, that brings Brazil subject international affairs these days. The second question, reforms. We basically believe the international institutions built after World War II, they're not representative anymore of international relations. The world has changed a lot. Brazil has been very vocal about this. G20, BRICS summits. We now have the COP13 within weeks in Brazil. So we've been very vocal on COP. We basically pushing for rich countries to provide a share so that the developing countries can meet their standards on environment and climate change. So that's a very important issue to Brazil. I would say central to our international affairs. Absolutely. And the last question is a kind of mediation, like basically I'll put how Brazil can contribute. We're trying to contribute from the beginning of this war with mediation efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Our president has, in the first month of his mandate, I was there in Brasília, by the way, I was in charge of the Itamaraty, as we call our foreign ministry. Was in charge of the unit, in charge of Ukraine back then. And the first month of the war, our president came already with the idea of the club of nations that could reach out to Ukraine and Russia. Have basically supported even President Trump's attempts to end the war. It's an ongoing process, as we all know it. Basically that we've been open to contribute to it, and I'm looking forward to hear from the other guests. Thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations on the initiative again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the reciprocity. I would like to invite Heorhii Erman from the Embassy of Ukraine in Brazil for his welcoming remarks. How Ukraine see Brazil?
Well, Brazil is a really important partner for us. It's a clear for all people, I think. First of all, I'm glad to welcome all participants from Brazilian, from Ukrainian side. We are glad that such events dedicated to Brazilian-Ukrainian relations have begun to take place on an annual basis. So last year, let's remember that a similar event was held at the Diplomatic Academy with the participation of 3 Brazilian experts and the Center for Transatlantic Dialogue. And today is the turn of one of the best Ukrainian scientific centers, Ukrainska Prisma. So it's very important that these ties, connections between Ukrainian and Brazilian experts on international relations, Ukrainian and Brazilian scientists, are growing each year, and we hope such conferences, such events will be possible in the future. The growth of cooperation and discussion between Ukrainian and Brazilian researchers, the possibility of conducting joint research works and even getting to know Ukraine personally is a positive signal for Ukrainian-Brazilian relations right now, especially because right now we have formally strategic partnership, but in reality we have modest relations. So on the one hand, we have quite many positive examples of bilateral cooperation between Ukraine and Brazil in the past. So we can mention the history of the Ukrainian community, which has made significant contribution to the development of Brazil, especially in such states like Paraná and Santa Catarina. We can mention all these economic projects which were realized during the work of famous Ukrainian ambassadors Yuri Bagaevsky, Volodymyr Alkamov, Igor Grushko, who died just few days ago. So they made significant efforts to develop this cooperation, and we have many positive examples in the past of this cooperation. So, like it was mentioned, space cooperation, insulin technologies, even some fertilizers export in the past. But right now we understand that it's not enough only to have positive economic projects. It's necessary to have general understanding by Brazilian population, by Brazilian society, in universities, among journalists, among researchers of realities of Ukraine. Realities not only of Ukrainian realities, but realities of our region, which was victim of different imperialist policies during decades and centuries, and victim actually of Russian imperialism during at least 3 centuries. So it's necessary to make knowledge about Ukraine visible and omnipresent here in Brazil. We understand that economic projects are not enough for long-term strategic partnership, because they can easily become a victim of political ideology, and the economic situation actually is changing. So yesterday it was space cooperation and insulin with Ukraine. Nowadays we can see growth of cooperation with Russia, diesel, fertilizers, wheat. So, well, we need of course we need more cooperation in scientific in the education field. We need to search some profitable for both sides business projects to develop relations. We can say that there are some positive examples even after the finish of all these projects like Alcantara and Insulin project. There were some positive examples of cooperation between two countries. Defense dialogue in 2020. The presidents of both countries meet, like President Zelensky and President Lula have met twice after the beginning of full-scale invasion. But unfortunately, despite repeated invitations, unfortunately, President and head of Itamaraty have not visited yet Ukraine. So we can say that we hope for more cooperation. We hope for more engagement of Brazilian side in some search of peaceful solution of the current war. We hope we hope efforts from Brazilian side also to help to bring Ukrainian kids who were stolen during the war by Russian army. We hope that such strategic partnership, which exists since 2029, could be realized even during this full-scale war, despite all strategic projects of Brazil with Russia. So Ukraine is also like a strategic partner for Brazil. Needs some engagement of Brazilian side in resolution of problems of Ukraine, and we hope for some successful economic projects in the future. In military sphere, just a few days ago, Igor Grushko, former ambassador, died, and he was we can say father of these agreements about military cooperation and cooperation in military technologic sector. Unfortunately, these agreements were not ratified, but we hope that in future we will capable to say that our partnership is strategic. Our partnership is not only modest, but in reality strategic. And Ukrainian embassy to Brazil will work on every field to realize this task, to realize more and more projects in scientific, education, economic spheres. And I would like to congratulate all participants because nowadays during this event you also make great contribution to development of humanitarian ties between Ukrainian and Brazilian society, which is fundamental for any strategic partnership. We need to understand each other. We need to know each other. We need to participate in events, Ukrainian participants in Brazilian events, Brazilian participants in Ukrainian events. We need to have more ties for successful strategic cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now let's move to our distinguished speakers, and we set the questions that you could find in the program, and as you could notice, all of them are speaking about the future. So what should we do for our bilateral relations? What is missing there, but what Georgi just reminded me, that definitely Ukraine and Brazil announced many years ago that we're strategic partners. It's not like this at the moment. So my question also will be to the speaker to think what two countries should do to return back to that strategic partnership that we expected to have. What we are missing on the agenda to really consider each other as the strategic partners. And as we already started going like Brazilian, Ukrainian experts, so I'm turning my eye to the next Brazilian speaker. Please excuse me if I'm pronouncing with some mistakes the names. Ivan is the boss in terms of drafting me how to pronounce. I'll do my best. And as for now, I would like to call for Uriã Fancelli, the international relations analyst and the commentator for the CNN Portugal. We talked about perceptions. We talked about strategic partnership that we want to be. So what is your analysis? Where are we now and how we can reach it? Your microphone?
Sorry. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I see a lot of familiar faces. So I'm glad to have the invitation to join you. Well, Ukraine and Brazil are in very different situations, but they both share something very important. Both have a chance to grow their global influence without breaking the system that theoretically protects them. For Ukraine, I think that the path runs through its alignment with the EU, with the IMF and international law. Kyiv I don't think it's fighting Kyiv isn't just fighting on the front lines, but it is also showing the world why sovereignty and territorial integrity matter. By defending its borders legally, pushing for the use of frozen Russian assets to fund reconstruction, and protecting food routes throughout the Black Sea, Ukraine turns its survival into power. That's more powerful than any of us could ever imagine. But Brazil, on the other hand, has power that comes from, don't take it literally, okay? But it has power that comes from stability and natural resources. Its strength lies in climate, energy, and its ability to build bridges between the global south and the north, something that Ukraine really tries to do, but due to the South's resentments against the West and also to Russian propaganda, it fails to succeed. But in the case of Brazil, if it can, for example, make this deforestation control a permanent state policy and transform its rare earth reserves into full value chains instead of just exporting raw materials, something that might be discussed today between the Brazilian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Marco Rubio. They have a meeting that will start in about 30 minutes. It could become a central player in global climate and economic governance. The fact that Brazil is also holding the COP next month in Belém, the north of Brazil, also sends this message because it gives Brazil a very powerful megaphone. But that megaphone only will have, it will only matter if it delivers results, which I think is like the biggest challenge. So I think that together, Brazil and Ukraine, they could build a smart partnership that mixes hard and soft power. Ukraine could bring security, food, reconstruction, know-how, and a strong legal case that resonates internationally. At the same time that Brazil brings climate leadership, energy, diplomacy, and development language that carries weight across continents. I think both countries, they need to find more common ground and send a more powerful message that can be familiarized with among different players, because in a fragmented world, and a fragmented world is something that is being pushed by Russia. We know that we follow the Russian propaganda. I think common ground can be a solution to bring countries that apparently have a different perspective and international views closer together.
Thank you very much. And now with the same question, I would like to go to Alexander Slifanchuk from the Transatlantic Dialogue Center, our partners in Ukraine, who is doing a significant part of the work for the Latin American dialogue with a lot of visits to the region. Alexander, can you put us into the context as well for Ukraine with many Latin American countries, and from your perceptions after working and visiting the region, do we have the potential for the strategic partnerships? What are those topics where Ukraine and Brazil really can enhance their dialogue?
Thank you, Hanna. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Alexander Slifanchuk from TDC. I had an opportunity to visit in Brazil on June this year. It was my first time in this country. Frankly speaking, I have different ideas about how we can enforce our cooperation. First of all, Ukraine must enhance and expand our diplomatic presence in Brazil. We need much bigger embassy with more experts and more diplomats on the ground in Brazil. I'm talking from the civil society. This is my message more to the Ukrainian government, that with a much bigger presence in the country, we can reestablish these strategic positions that we used to have before, many years before, actually. Secondly, Ukraine must reestablish the soft power presence in Brazil as well. I'm not talking about the embassy, but the Ukrainian Institute. Unfortunately, due to the funding shortages that the Ukrainian Institute, I think, faces nowadays during the war, it's logical. But in the future, for the future perspective, Ukraine should not only concentrate on European capitals like Berlin or Paris or London, but also when talking about Brazil, we should have the office of the Ukrainian Institute in Rio de Janeiro, in São Paulo, or in Brazil. I think it would be better to have in São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, where there are more presence of academia and cultural circles. Finally, Ukraine can be the competitor for in Brazil in the market of fertilizers. I'm sure that Brazilian government is pretty pro-Brazilian, let's say, pragmatic in this field. So we must look for common interests where what Brazil is looking for in Eastern Europe. And fertilizers is one of the fields where Ukraine, of course, after the war and reestablishment of security in Ukraine, can be the strategic partner. I would prefer not touching the topic of space cooperation because I'm not expert in this at all. But let's talk about security. I'm sure that Brazil has problems with internal security and criminal organized crime, let's say. And if I'm looking to, for example, our cooperation with Argentina already was interested in cooperation in the field of drones for the use for Ukrainian drones for the Argentinian national police to control their, let's say, suburbs of huge cities. In this field, Ukraine, with our huge experience in drone production and drone usage for security reasons, for vigilance of the terrain, would be our good opportunity to cooperate with Brazilian colleagues. I think in the MilTech is a future of Ukraine, and in this field, Brazil is one of the biggest country of South America, and with the biggest armed forces and with the biggest police forces. In this field, Ukraine should cooperate and find this common interests with Brazilian counterparts. And with these concrete projects, I think the possibility of reestablishment of our strategic cooperation can be possible. I hope so.
Thank you very much. Just referring to one of your ideas about the Ukrainian Institute, as the head of the supervisory board at the Ukrainian Institute, I would like to say that Brazil is one of the priority countries for this year, and at least as it is discussed for the next years as well. Including that now the Ukrainian, it would be not that big secret, but we are finalizing the research about the Brazilian culture and how Ukrainian cultural diplomacy can work in Brazil that we know will be presented by the end of this year. So we are just waiting a little bit, probably a month, to have it. And that would be quite an interesting start for more coherent cultural and educational cooperation between two countries. Even that we already had a successful project in the sphere of the cultural diplomacy, but you're absolutely right. They were more of the testing pilot projects rather than the strategic work. And we would be dreaming to have the office in any of the Brazilian city or in general in Latin America, but financing during the war is always the issue. So that is in the list of the, not the wishful thinking, but the planning for the future as soon as Ukrainian state budget would be able to spend something to more creative rather than just defense of our territories. But with this idea, I would like to move forward and to invite Fabrizio Vitorino, digital journalist, Special Federal University of Santa Catarina. And let's speak a little bit about the contribution to the international security as well. Do we have something that two countries can do together to, as now everybody's saying, to secure their world order, rules-based order, or we don't need it because everything is now in the digital sphere is just about the today in use social networks, and as soon as we are secure there, we can forget about those norms of the United Nations that we cared about for 80 years. Fabrizio, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Dr. Hanna. First and foremost, this is a huge pleasure to be here and to be able to talk to you, to my colleagues and people that I admire, and especially Professor Hanna. I've been hearing you speaking in podcasts and YouTube, and it seems like we are friends already. So it's a huge pleasure to be here. When it comes to your question, it is very linear how our colleagues that spoke before me here, they went through these roads. I mean, for instance, Igor said about the roles that countries, they don't have roles, which comes to the basic theory of international relations, which is countries don't have friends, we have interests. And then we moved to Heorhii, and he said, we need to meet. I mean, Brazil and Ukraine, we need to meet. We need to meet and greet. And I like to add to that quote, there's a beer between us. We need to meet and remove that beer and look each other in the eye. So Alexander said that we need to grow via a functional system, which we don't have right now. Our president, Mr. Lula, he is often fighting, ever since his first term in 2002, he's been fighting against the tyranny of veto in the United Nations. So this is something that we have to fight against. This is something that is always gonna put the international system in jeopardy. So this tyranny of veto, in which the one superpower can do whatever it is that it feels like. So if we have 30 powers, 20 powers, 40 powers, we know that they are no match for one superpower's will. So we need to think that despite the fact that Ukraine did not have so many people in its embassy during the last 20 years, it is a different situation. You were building a country, you went through 2 revolutions, you were building a democracy, and actually this is an argument for the Russian propaganda, that Ukraine is a liberal democracy. It was portrayed by Vedem, Freedom House, and the Economist, all those institutes that measure democracies. But of course, this is a new democracy. So this isn't something that is bad, but it's something that is portrayed as a bad thing, and it's been bought by Brazilian media and Brazilian population as well. Maybe this country is not that stable, and maybe we should wait a little bit until we engage with that country that we don't know actually very profoundly, despite the fact that we have over 500,000 Ukrainian descendants living in Brazil. It's a huge diaspora. So we have so many things in common. And once again, when it comes to the work of your diplomacy, the Ukrainian diplomacy in Brazil, we need to know that soft power has been playing a key role in the Brazilian scenario and the Brazilian construction of the image that we have about Ukraine. I've been working with the media and hovering about the space for the last 25 years. So I have been traveling to most every single big city in Eastern European, this bloc, the post-Soviet, which is a term that we don't like, but it is what it is. We have to name it. We don't like it as well, global south, so we need new names probably. But I have been traveling to those countries and have been feeling the differences between this democracy building. And Ukraine has been on the verge of something big, but again, there's a huge problem. It's neighbors with a huge force. And actually this huge force has been dragging Brazil into his gravity, into its atmosphere. So let's remember from 2010, they have hosted the Olympics, Sochi. They have hosted the World Cup, the World Soccer Cup. They have hosted Formula One. They have hosted most every single big venue in the big scenario, in the big sphere. So this is soft power. They have been violating the international law over and over, although despite all this, they have been enforcing their soft power on a global scene with a very successful measure. And in Brazil, there's a key specific, we were talking about the Ukrainian Institute in Brazil and how we can improve its operations in Brazil. Let's not forget that Rosatrudnichество, which is the Russian promotion agency and institute of, let's not mention the propaganda, has been operating in Brazil for over 20 years now and building its own news agency and building close ties with Brazilian academic community. I can't remember one single big university in Brazil that has not one study group or nucleon that has close ties with Russia. So they have been building this up. It's been adding up for the last 25 years, and it's normal because there's a void. And it's not a big thing that we had a void. Once again, Ukraine has been fighting for its survival now more than ever, and Hanna is quite right about this. I've been traveling through Ukraine for the last three weeks, and I could feel the difference. It's different once you can feel it in your skin, and you can see it with your eyes, and you can travel through cities. It is different when you have to fight for your survival. So, how can we approach? We can approach between Brazil and Ukraine. First of all, we need to meet. We need to know about Ukraine. We need to enforce soft power. We need to have music. We need to have food. We need to be on the place. We had this huge Ukrainian community in Paraná, which is not a faraway state, not a forgotten state. It is a very important state. We have Ukrainians. We have this sympathetic community towards Ukrainians in São Paulo. We need to enforce the food diplomacy, the musical diplomacy. We need to be there. There's this huge IT defense, IT scenario in which Ukraine and Brazil, we can cooperate. We have we have all the corpuses that Ukrainians need to prove their technologies, not on the military ground, but on the civil ground. So we need to meet, we need to know each other, and we need to know how it is that we can cooperate. And it's not that we're going to have to do it all at the same time. We need to start. We need to have a master plan for the next 2 years, for the next 5 years. We will not be able to counter 20 years, 25, 30 years of investments, of profound, deep, and large investments in Brazil in 1 year, in 6 months. This is unreal. We just need to start. And I also want to congratulate the current Ukrainian team in Brazil, the diplomatic team in Brazil, because you have been doing so much for the last 6 months, and it's amazing. So that is what we need to do. Start and keep going and keep going and keep convincing people in Ukraine that Brazil is a key player in Latin America and in Global South. Once again, we don't like this term, but it is what it is.
Thank you very much. We also try not to use the Global South term within the Ukrainian prism. That's why we started using global partnership, but we understand that unfortunately not all countries there are partners of Ukraine. The world is a little bit more complicated, especially now, but at least the global outreach from our side, that's where we are trying to be. And as you already mentioned, São Paulo, so that is logical to move to our next speaker, and I would like to introduce Professor Eunice Ostrensky from the Center for Ukrainian Studies at the University of São Paulo. Eunice, as our speakers just talked about, that we're just discovering de facto each other despite the long history of relations between the countries. You are with the Ukrainian Center. Do we really that far and been further within the last 5 years due to the political changes in the countries and the war? Or it is more that we are less in the news, yep, but the perspective is there. What is your view?
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. I think my contribution to this debate and the suggested questions concern my academic and educational position. I am a professor, as you told, in the political science department at the University of São Paulo, and also coordinator of the Center for the Ukrainian Studies, which also is housed in the same department. The Center for Ukrainian Studies was established in December 2024, and currently we are 8 researchers and scholars from different institutions in São Paulo, Paraná, and even Vienna in Austria. The center aims to develop research, produce scientific dissemination materials, provide institutional support, and foster multidisciplinary dialogue between Brazilian and Ukrainian partners. This effort contributes to the strengthening of Ukrainian studies in Brazil, I think, which is a field still largely underexplored within national academia. The principal themes guiding the center include Russian colonialism and imperialism, Ukrainian civil society in response to Russian occupation, migration, displacement, and the Ukrainian diaspora. Ukrainian history, Brazil-Ukraine international relations, challenges to building democratic order in both nations, human rights violations during wartime, and discussions on just war theory and the morality of war in the context of Russia's ongoing large-scale invasion of Ukraine. I would like to mention that our group is studying the occupation situation and how teachers in these regions have been affected by it. One of our main members is Vicente Ferraro, has been to Ukraine in the beginning of this year, and he conducted a very substantive research on these sites, and he's publishing the results of this research here in Brazil and also in England and United States. So we think our contribution is not only to Brazilian audience, but also to a global audience. We have been organizing a series of academic events between Brazilian, Ukrainian, American, Latin American, and European intellectuals. We are also engaged in publishing articles in Brazilian media. I don't know if you are aware that last month we managed to publish a very important article by an Ukrainian professor, Heorhii, on Folha de São Paulo, and it had a very good repercussion. Next week, we'll hold a special session on the war in Ukraine at Brazilian Leading Social Science Symposium, which is called UNPOX. And we think this is necessary to promote a better understanding of the Ukrainian people's right to self-determination. Our contribution, therefore, is to this huge investment in our relations, is to foster academic ties with Ukrainian experts and clarify the public opinion about the war.
Thank you very much. And the last but not the least, I would like to give the floor to our in-house expertise, Ivan Fichkor, our expert on the Latin American and Caribbean region. And Ivan, it was your initiative to organize this event and to set the agenda. So it is now your responsibility to sum up and to come from where we started, from a little bit of the history of the bilateral relations from our diplomats to the current view of Ukraine inside of Brazil, to the proposals of the perspective that Alexander presented to us. So what should we do as well to bring our relations to the new level? What are the main challenges that are in front of us now that we need to overstep or to counter or to deal with to bring Ukraine-Brazilian relations to the new level? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hanna. Thank you, all participants, for this important discussion, and special thanks to our embassy in Brazil for cooperation in such a important event. And it's really a pleasure to speak as the final panelist today after such an insightful discussion, showing how diplomacy, academia, and the media together illuminate today's global challenges. Together, I think these perspectives remind us that the global change must be guided by responsibility, not rivalry. And we know that both Ukraine and Brazil today find themselves at the crossroads of global transformation. Despite the distance between our countries, both nations share a deep commitment to the same values, like sovereignty, international law, and peace. And we both believe that the world order must be based not on force, but on rules. For Ukraine, this principle is not abstract, it is existential. Every day, our country defends its right to exist within internationally recognized borders. And for Brazil, this belief is reflected in decades of consistent diplomacy, rejecting aggression, promoting dialogue, and upholding international law at the foundation of stability. This is why Ukraine and Brazil can and should cooperate as bridge builders. Brazil, as a leading voice in Latin America, brings legitimacy and experience in dialogue, and Ukraine, as a defender of sovereignty in Europe, brings moral authority and a lived example of resistance for justice. And together we stand for a reformed, balanced, and human international order. Much has been said about the need to reform international institutions like the UN, for example, and Ukraine and Brazil, each in their own way, have been advocating the same goal to make these bodies more representative, more effective, and more accountable. For example, the UN Security Council still reflects the realities of 1945, not 2025. Both our countries understand that this status quo is unsustainable. Brazil's call for expanding representation and Ukraine's painful experience with the veto paralysis both lead us to the same conclusion. Reform must not be cosmetic, it must restore credibility. In this context, Ukraine's voice as a country fighting for survival and Brazil as a global advocate for equity give moral and political weight to this reform. Our cooperation can add ethic to geopolitics, proving that a new global order must be more just, not just more multipolar. This is also a truly pragmatic, I think, approach to foreign policy, because only a fair and law-based international system can guarantee real security and mutual respect, not a world where the strongest feel entitled to pressure others, whether military or economically. And Ukraine and Brazil both contribute to international peace and security. For example, Brazil has a strong peacekeeping record from Haiti to Africa, demonstrating leadership through mediation and humanitarian engagement. Ukraine, meanwhile, has been on the front line of defending not only its borders, but the principles of the UN Charter. Our message together should be clear. Conflicts must be resolved by negotiation, but negotiation can only succeed when grounded in justice. Beyond politics, both Ukraine and Brazil strengthen global stability in very tangible ways through nuclear non-proliferation, food security, and environmental protection. For example, Brazil, as we know, has long championed nuclear disarmament and remains a signatory of the Treaty of Tlatelolco, keeping its nuclear program strictly peaceful. Ukraine also voluntarily gave up the world's third largest nuclear arsenal and was later invaded by a nuclear power. And today we live under daily nuclear blackmail and attack near our power plants. That is why our joint advocacy for nuclear safety and non-proliferation is both symbolic and urgent. On food security, Ukraine and Brazil are natural partners also, two agriculture powers feeding the world. Ukraine's Grain for Ukraine initiative and Brazil's role in the global alliance against hunger or poverty show our shared commitment to ensuring no one is left hungry. On environmental security, our paths converge again. Brazil, as already was mentioned today, by the representatives of the Embassy of Brazil in Ukraine, is a host of COP30, leads global climate efforts. Ukraine, despite the war, keeps environmental safety as a key element of Ukraine's peace formula. And we can mention also about Russian aggression that has devastated our ecosystem, from the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, for example, to recent strikes like the one that killed more than 30,000 pigs in one farm in the Kharkiv region in Ukraine. When Ukraine supports Brazil's environmental leadership, it's not just solidarity, it's shared survival, because ecological peace is part of global peace. Another field where cooperation is crucial is education. Both our societies are facing similar changes, ensuring access to education, supporting mental health, and counter disinformation. And in Ukraine, despite the war, we continue to develop academic cooperation with Latin American partners, including and especially Brazilian. And at the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism, we have been working with different universities to expand Latin American and Brazilian studies, engaging more students, more researchers to study the region. And we are glad to see that in Brazil too, Ukrainian studies are beginning to grow. For instance, at the University of Sao Paulo, and it's very, very great that we have the representative of this Ukrainian center here, and also other academic institutions. And I think that this mutual learning, Ukraine studying Brazil and Brazil studying Ukraine, creates a culture bridge that no war can destroy. And such cooperation could evolve into a regional platform, perhaps Ukrainian Latin American summit, or an academic network that promotes research, people-to-people diplomacy, shared innovation. Brazil as a regional leader could play really important role in this process. And to sum up, the dialogue between Ukraine and Brazil is more than bilateral diplomacy. It's really a symbol of a world seeking balance between justice and peace, sovereignty, solidarity. And so far apart, our nations share one belief: the world must be governed by love, not fear. And together we can promote a just peace, democratic process, sustainable security, not only for our region, but for all world. And the final message from me in this speech that geography does not divide us, values and inspiration unite us. And Ukraine and Brazil can shape a new narrative cooperation based on sovereignty, justice, shared responsibility for global peace, and maybe these things help us to reach the real strategic partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's quite an optimistic. I would say that I expected much more pessimistic session here. Probably we need somebody from the big critics of the bilateral relations and the perspectives that two of our countries may have or may not, because let's be honest, we heard these opinions as well, that probably it is too far. Everybody should concentrate on their own regions, their own countries, and why, as for now, at least during the war, we should think about some far shores for countries, especially if we don't have a huge trade between us. But as our speakers today really demonstrate to us that it is the window of opportunity for us. It is the interest that is growing, and everything is in our hands how much we will be able to promote this cooperation, especially considering that there are much more joint interests. The question is implementation, first of all, and we have the basis, especially if we would go to the legislation basis, the agreements that been signed between the two countries many years ago, but they are already there. That is the most difficult stage usually in the bilateral relations, to have these basis for the practical implementation. So we have 10 minutes left, and I encourage our guests to raise their hands in case they have questions to any of our participants. Also, if you're shy of speaking, we have our chat that I just opened and see that somebody already started discussing the books, and that is great. Please send the materials, if you think that others can be interesting to read about the bilateral relations, also just send the link over there. And I give 1 minute to everybody to decide if somebody would like. You can use the raise the hand on the top of your screen, or just show me that you're ready for the questions over here. Probably I will make just a small question to all of our speakers that we see over there. And yep, it's exactly what one of our guests are just signed there. I wanted to be that devil advocate, as everybody was so positive. So what are the obstacles? What really don't allow us, objectively or subjectively, to move forward to the new level of the bilateral relations? And Georgi, are you ready to answer, or to also ask the question? Because it was at the same time your hand raised with the questions appeared there.
Well, I'm not Brazilian historian, but I can say that in our opinion, not only mine, but many people from Ukrainian side, Brazil had in Brazilian history, there were some moments when country had to choose among cooperation with authoritarian and democratic countries. We can recall the most bright example. It was in 1940. We can remember the statement of President of Getúlio Vargas, which was criticized in Brazil after the statement was pronounced after the fail of French defense in the Second World War, when German troops started to conquer France. And we remember that it was a huge internal political struggle at the time among people who were keen to cooperate with some authoritarian countries, and politicians who were keen to cooperate with some with democratic countries, first of all, the United States at the time, with Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration. And actually, it's a perfect thing in Brazilian history that Brazilians have such people in their history like Osvaldo Aranha or Rio Branco, because these people in the most difficult periods of world history, they made right choices. And Osvaldo Aranha, who actually wrote about the situation in 1940, he acknowledged that after the statement of President Getúlio Vargas, he had actually desired to leave a post of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Brazil, but he continued his efforts to persuade Brazilian society, Brazilian president, Brazilian political and business elite militaries that Brazil should support democratic states in that conflict. Actually, Getúlio Vargas and many other people and General Dutra acknowledged that he was right at all after this discussion. So in Ukraine, we see this situation actually. I cannot even mention the name of this country, which could be example of authoritarianism right now in Europe or in the Eurasian space. But we see this choice in this way. Brazil and Ukraine, despite of lack of economic partnership, we are closer because Brazilian people and Ukrainian people have desire to maintain democratic order, maintain rule of law, maintain also system of international law on the world stage. And people both in Ukraine and Brazil think that war is an evil. So unfortunately, we can say that right now Ukraine as a country faces not only war from the side of Mr. Putin, but from the side of Russian people. Everybody knows that Russian people actually support this war. 80% is a significant number. And unfortunately, the main problem for some different cooperation schemes which exist in this field actually that values among peoples are different. Actually, Brazilian way of life, Brazilian political style, Brazilian political system is democratic, despite of all some problems which can exist in every democratic country, and that's why I do believe that Brazil finally in this conflict, which can actually continue many years ahead, even some new war can occur in the futures. Finally, Brazil will be a strong supporter of Ukraine. Nowadays, we ask for some more efforts to bring the end to this war and to support Ukrainian civilians who were captured by Russian army. So we think that Brazilian diplomacy has abilities to help in this case. Brazilian diplomacy is strong thanks to Rio Branco. Brazilian diplomacy has very strong image, like country with a more than a century of peaceful existence with all neighbors, and actually country which is not aggressive very big time and in history. So we think that it's good example, it's good image. All this heritage of Brazilian personalities like Rio Branco, Osvaldo Aranha could be used in the right way to bring end to this war and also to understand better position of Ukrainians.
Thank you, Georgi. Alexander.
Yeah, I would just like to mention and add to Georgi's words that it's not only the Ukrainian task to enhance our cooperation with Brazil or to expand our cooperation with Brazil as colleagues, but it's also I think from the whole European Union task for them and for the West, let's say, I would say more for Brussels and for European Union colleagues to look into the South, especially to Brazil, because very often I hear the same statement from Brazilian colleagues in different panel discussions, for example, in Spain, who state that very often European colleagues before did not see Brazil at the same level of cooperation, especially on technical cooperation when they are talking about interchange of different technology with Brazilian colleagues. Maybe it's because of BRICS or because of connections with China or with countries that do not share the same values with Europe, let's say, from BRICS. But from the Ukrainian perspective, we see Brazil as a different one. Brazil is democracy, and I do agree with Georgi that Brazil is a partner at the same democratic level as European ones. So in this case, we should not expect from Ukraine some huge victories in this field. We should unite our efforts with the Europeans because we do not have such a huge presence, economic and diplomatic, in Brazil as the European Union has. So our first ally in this cooperation with Brazil should be European Union, and Europeans should look at Brazil with different perspective, different eyes, because we cannot, we do not support BRICS, of course, but BRICS is not for forever. BRICS is just an organization, that's it. So I would say that Europeans should reconsider their their cooperation with Brazil in this field, the West in general. Because the future of the international relations, I think, will be divided into two camps. And Europe should struggle for Brazil to stay in the Western camp or in the democratic one, despite BRICS and all these summits and statements. When we see the economic cooperation, this European world, the Western world and Brazil is much higher, much more profound than with China. So in this field, I do hope that Ukraine will have this good synergy with European Union towards Brazil.
Ivan, and I would encourage somebody from the Brazilian side to be the last speaker commenting on this question. I see the Uriã hand. So it is Ivan and Uriã, and we will be concluding our online roundtable today.
Thank you. To continue answering the question about the obstacles we have now between our countries to improve relations between our countries, we can say that there are indeed several factors. First, I should mention also about the Russian propaganda and disinformation, which continues to be a serious challenge across the region, not only in Brazil, but as we know, in other Latin American countries. For example, recently during the so-called BRICS Media Forum, a cooperation agreement was signed between RIA Novosti, one of the key instruments of Russian propaganda, and Brazilian media outlets. And of course, such initiatives distort the perception of the world and of Ukraine's position. And the second, broader BRICS cooperation, as already Alexander mentioned, sometimes narrows the space for a balanced approach, as Russia often uses these platforms for political influence. We know that the Brazilian position is to use the BRICS cooperation mostly for economic cooperation, but there's always a threat from the Russia part who wants to use this as an instrument to use this like political instrument. And third, we have had a successful bilateral project in the past. For instance, the Alcantara Space initiative, which slowed down trust building. But I think that this experience should guide us toward more realistic, more sustainable forms of cooperation. And it's also important to recognize that Russia still operates with waste resources in the region, including embassies with hundreds of personnel, while Ukraine unfortunately has more limited capacity. However, I want to emphasize the extraordinary work of our Ukrainian diplomats in Brazil, especially over the past year. Despite limited resources, they have achieved impressive results, establishing new contacts not only in the capital of Brazil, but also across regional states and university. And finally, we should make better use of the Ukrainian diaspora in Brazil, one of the largest in the world, with around 500,000 of people, and it can become a vital bridge for culture, educational, and even economic cooperation if we build a consistent state policy to engage it. Yes, challenges exist, but so also we have at the same time enormous potential.
Uriã. Sound?
Okay. I always forget about the sound. I think that obstacles can always be turned into opportunities. So I will finish with a suggestion. I think that Ukraine and Brazil can both play a role in strengthening international security. But if we're being honest, that only works if we acknowledge the double standards that exist on both sides. When I say double standards, this is what I mean. In Brazil, this is very clear. When Bolsonaro was president, he still went to Moscow just days before the invasion of Ukraine, fully aware of what was about to happen. And then now we have Lula. We've seen the same kind of inconsistency. He chose to appear at the military parade in Moscow this May, at a moment when Putin was being isolated by the Western countries. But in both cases, I think ideology shaped foreign policy more than principles. In Ukraine's case, the double standards, they come from a different place. It's not ideological, it's about survival. but the fact that it's still there, it cannot be ignored. Ukraine has had to put up with Trump's provocations and absurdities, not because it wants to, but because because confronting him directly could jeopardize the Ukrainian defense. We see what happens when Trump tries to provoke Ukraine. But Trump is constantly setting traps for Ukraine to overreact, and Ukraine knows it can't afford to fall for them. Having said that, Brazil has real assets to offer internationally. It has, as Igor mentioned, solid peacekeeping experiences. It has diplomatic credibility, especially among the global south countries. And I'm aware that this is not a term that this group likes. But every time that Brazil sends mixed signals on something as fundamental as territorial sovereignty, it weakens its own position. And if a country wants to have serious voice in pushing for UN reform or defending international law, it can't keep shifting its stance depending on who's in power or which bloc it wants to please. Ukraine is in a much tougher position. It's fighting for its existence, and at the same time, it's forced to deal with the political games coming from Trump. And his behavior is a perfect example. He's unpredictable, and he enjoys testing Zelensky's limits. Ukraine knows that if it clashes with him, I mean, too directly, it will have problems. So what I mean is that all of this double standards on both sides, it could be an opportunity for partnership between the two countries, exactly because that either Brazil or Ukraine, they are not perfect actors. They don't have clean hands, but they do have real experience to bring to the table. Brazil's background and Ukraine's defense for its sovereignty and the resilience that Ukraine has. So, and I'll finish with this, but I think that in a world where double standards are everywhere, a powerful message that comes from actors who admit their imperfections, it might actually land with more credibility than the kind of high morality that we always see everywhere. So maybe the first step would be to admit our flaws and then build from there.
Thank you very much. The frank discussion is definitely what the two sides needed. I see Alexander hand, 1 minute.
I'm going to be fast. Great comment, actually, Uriã. I think here Ukraine is pragmatic as Brazil is. Brazil bought Russian fertilizers and petrol from the beginning of the invasion. And we often advise for our global South colleague from Brazil or from South America that Brazil is a pragmatic country. Lula is a super pragmatic politician. Lula can negotiate with the right and the left. So I think Ukraine is showing pragmatism as well. I think Ukrainian stakeholders will not be in conflict with Americans if Americans will put these trade limits on Brazil for buying Russian petrol. In this case, we cannot jeopardize our relations with the United States. It's obviously. Unfortunately, our relations with Brazil can be even hostage of these Ukraine-US relations in the future. Unfortunately, I think in this step, Kyiv will follow the pragmatic line, and we both should understand that some way, some statements from Zelensky, from Lula could conflict. So I would say that Ukraine must follow the pragmatic line as well as Brazil is following. Hopefully, after the war, we could cooperate in more tranquil situation as now.
Thank you very much, Alexander. On this note, I would like to finalize and to conclude our almost round table. I really like the feeling of the round table, even if we have all the squares on the screen. But I believe that the today discussion gave the impetus to both sides to think about the future possibilities for the joint projects, joint topics on which we will be able to develop probably some policy recommendations for both Ukraine and Brazil. And Ivan, let's think maybe we can do together with the today's speakers a short memo for Ukraine and Brazil of where to go, what is important, and how we can proceed. Because I believe that in addition to the conversations that we usually have as an experts, it's always beneficial to present to our members of parliament, to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the conclusions and the ideas that the expert community can bring and how we see the possibilities for the future cooperation. Also to attract attention of the media to the dialogue that is happening between two countries. So I hope that everybody would be very open for the future events and for the future collaboration, at least at our level, at the expert level. And as soon as the conditions permit, Ukrainian Prism is always glad to greet the Brazilian experts in Kyiv. And I also hope that we and our colleagues from other think tanks in Ukraine will have more opportunities to visit Brazil again, and not only as a touristic destination, but first of all as the vibrant intellectual country where we will be able to continue a dialogue on the global issues and on the bilateral perspectives. My thank you to the embassies, and especially to the Embassy of Ukraine, who initiated this event today. We hope that we will be able to upload this video also online, so you can share it with your colleagues and students. Until the next meetings at the Ukrainian Prism platform or other international online events. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.